Hey folks, Lol Maddie here. Just want to let you know, in this episode, I had the opportunity to sit down and speak with author Stuart Thaman. There were quite a little bit of difficulties in the beginning, technically speaking, so we decided that this one's going to be audio only. That's why the thumbnail is going to be the background for the entire video, so if you want to put this in the background and just listen to what amazing things this author had to say, I would encourage that. That being said, I feel like I really truly got to know him exceptionally well. He didn't only just talk about his works as an author, but also talked about some of his personal life things, what's going on in his life, as well as some of his motivations and advice for, up and coming authors. Honestly, I'm going to have to say it. If you like grim dark fantasy, if you like speculative fiction, or if you're simply just a fan of lit RPG, I would strongly encourage you to give him a look-sees and see if he might be up your alley of enjoyment. I'll be posting links to his publishing company as well as some other personal pages of his in the description below, so it'll make it easy for you to look him up. That being said, I just wanted to say thank you all for being here. If this kind of content is going to be in your alley, please feel free to leave me a like and a subscribe. I'm currently booked until the end of the last week of October to sit down with an author a week, and that's kind of going to be about what my goal is to sit down with at least one person a week and post one video per week. So, without further ado, let's get into this interview slash podcast slash, well, one way or the other, it's a passion project, and I'm going to keep doing this. So call it whatever you might want to, but that's what it is at its core. Keep reading and happy adventures. Hi, thanks for being the first person to sit down with me for this, man. I know you said you'd wanted to discuss. Oh, I just had it right. I just had it right on the top of my hand there. The Grimdark,
Yep.
Forsaken Talent series. And so I kind of read the synopsis on them, and it does seem pretty interesting. I'm really eager to give book one a try. I love, Sword Art Online is one of my favorite animes, so anything in that kind of realm or universe is definitely up my alley. And I was just kind of curious, like, are you working on a book 3? And as well as, is there like a certain point in time in your life that you were really motivated to put this idea to paper for this series?
Yeah, it actually got the idea from it, just reading the Lit RPG Reddit, and somebody had put a thread on there like, hey, looking for stories from the perspective of the villain. And a lot of people had good recommendations for like dungeon core stuff where, it's still a good guy, but he's, not all the way good kind of thing. And nobody had one, or nobody could come up with one where the main character is legitimately the bad guy of the story, not, good guy doing bad things for the right reasons, but just straight up the villain. And I was like, I could write that. And that was, God, I think it was back in 2018. And I cranked out those first 2 in like 6 months and really wrote them fast and really liked them, and got them out there, got them edited up and everything and out there. I've got book 3 has been outlined. I've been vastly behind on basically all of my writing. I've actually only written one novel since those books came out, just one, the second in the Shadowless series. But I had 2020, of course, which was like hell on earth for virtually everyone.
Right.
Moved cities, moved jobs, changed entire career fields, all that stuff. Just getting settled back then in Lexington, Kentucky, where I moved to where I am now. I'm getting settled here. And then just a couple years after that, my wife had a brain aneurysm. So it derailed again.
Oof. I'm sorry
and
to hear
it's just
that, man.
it was, I mean, it's just a wild time. So, and I've actually, it's been 5 years since I've been working in law now, and I've changed firms 5 times. So, getting settled and figuring out, exactly what I want to do and kind of getting the day job under my feet has been difficult, to say the least. So,
Right.
pretty secure now, though, in a spot that I like. I don't have any plans on moving. Been getting back into a lot of book work in general, writing a lot of short stories, kind of getting the juices flowing. And like I said, I've got book 3 mapped out. I know where I need to go with it. Part of the reason it's been so slow as well is, especially in Lit RPG, you have a ton of notes, and I can't find my note document for that series. So all the character stats, all their items, the descriptions, I just have to go back through both books and recreate it. And that is such a daunting task that I just haven't felt like sitting down to do it.
I can only
It's just,
imagine.
yeah, it's so
Yeah.
much work.
Oh
And
yeah.
I just need to figure that out and just sit down and actually do it one day. And I just haven't.
Right.
But soon. So I'm finishing up an editing project right now, actually tonight. And then I really, that's kind of next on my plate is getting back into that, getting deep in the weeds. And typically, when I'm going, I'll write a solid 35 to 50,000 words a week. And that'll crank a novel out in a month. I just got to get it started, got to get it
Right.
under my feet.
Well, I mean, as we were talking earlier before we sat down for this, you've explained to me, you practice law, you are a musician, you're part of a couple of bands. Well, you have your solo project as well as being a member of a band. Did I mention the publishing company, or did I mention that you own Neff Publishing yet?
Yeah, Netflix Publishing. So I've been ramping that up a lot too, and spending a lot of time there. I mean, I don't like to be bored. That's the
Right.
worst thing. The worst thing on earth to me is being bored. So I mean, my wife says I have too many hobbies. It's probably true. I just always doing something. So playing music. I mean, I've been playing guitar since I was 7 years old. Love playing music. And yeah, just been running the publishing side as well, and published now like a dozen or so authors. Very small, but
Oof,
trying to
I'm not
build that up.
sure, not entirely sure what's going on, but your webcam seems to be glitching out pretty bad.
Uh-oh. I'll turn it back on. We'll see if that helps.
Right, Tech 101.
All right, let's try that. Yeah. I am out obviously on my porch, so it might just be a little bit far from the router, but I should be like directly under my router right now. So that's weird.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Oh well. I can
it's been a little bit. That's kind of
video
also.
off. It's gonna be whack.
Yeah, it was there was a little bit of stutter during your explanation in that first question I asked you, and then it just kind of it just looked like your face was, remember, I can't remember the movie, but it's like where their face just twitches all over the place. I just didn't want to keep going and then have you looking that way and not at least let you be aware of what was going on.
Yeah, you'll just get my voice. Oh well.
Yeah, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. But so I know something else that you had mentioned to me was the novelization of the Chaos Wars mini game, and I was just wondering if you wanted to take a moment and kind of break that down, because there was, when I was trying to search it, there were so many different things that showed up that I couldn't exactly pinpoint the exact one you were speaking about. So I was just curious if you wanted to discuss that at all, because with, like world building and tabletop games and Dungeons and Dragons are a really big part of the reason why I fell in love with this genre. And I'm wondering if that is something similar with you as well.
Yeah, that I've been playing. I mean, I've played various tabletop games and card games and RPGs. I mean, I think I first got into tabletop RPGs probably sometime around like 2004, 2005, like right when I got into high school, and had a friend group that played D&D and Legend of the Five Rings, which is actually my personal favorite tabletop RPG. I love that game. The Star Wars RPG, and probably three or four others that I can't even remember, but we all got into that. So I've been playing that stuff forever. I DM'd campaigns all through college, and we actually I ran the D&D club because I'm a nerd, and it's a ton of fun. But we had the D&D club, and we met twice a week, two different campaigns that I ran for all 4 years. It was a ton of fun. By the end, it was so popular. I mean, we'd have 5 players plus me as a DM for 6 people, and then there'd be 25 people in the room just to watch.
Nice.
It was a blast. Everybody loved it. I ran that twice a week. But I got into Chaos Wars. I was doing a Cincinnati Comic Con up in Cincinnati, and my booth was next to the Chaos Wars booth, and that's where they're from. They have their literal forge and everything is there, where they actually manufacture the miniatures.
That's
And
cool.
our booths were side by side, and the owner of the minis game was talking to me, and he's like, hey, our next rule book is about to come out in like a month or something like that. I've been reaching out to any author that I know, trying to get short stories for backgrounds of the main characters. And he asked me if I wanted to be at least submit a piece for it, and I was like, hell yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. and he gave me a list of characters, and he's like, pick any of these. They're all going to be, unique miniatures in their the next set. And he's like, pick any of them. These are ones that haven't been taken by other authors already. Write a story, get it to me the next couple weeks, and we'll see if we can get in there. Well, I went home and I wrote the whole thing that night and gave it to him the next day at the convention, and he really liked it. It was a lot of fun. I actually picked their flagship miniature, which nobody else had kind of had the balls to say they wanted to pick that one. So picked their flagship mini, which is Lena. She's a vampire princess, which is a lot of fun to write. And he basically let me have sort of free reign, gave me a lot of the world building, like you mentioned. He gave me a lot of that, was already written, and kind of their background and whatnot for their setting. And I just wrote the character into that setting for the short story. And we both liked the short story quite a bit when it was all done. And when it came out in the rule book, that I was like, you know what? I could easily turn this into a full-length novel, and we ended up doing the collaboration on that, and it's a lot of fun. So that book is Blood and Ash. I've got another one in that series kind of vaguely mapped out in my mind, but I think that was the last traditional epic fantasy that I wrote before I discovered lit RPG, and then wrote 5 lit RPGs afterwards because I really like that stuff.
Heck yeah, that's really awesome, man. And I actually used to live in was it Brunswick? Like right outside of Cincinnati. I think it was Brunswick. I didn't live there for very terribly long, but I took a Greyhound to the Cincinnati station in Cincinnati, and was there for about 6 to 8 months. So now growing up in Cincinnati though, because I mean, if you were starting high school in 2004 in the 2004 area, then you and I are about the same age. And like, what was it like growing up in Cincinnati for you? Like, back in the 90s and early 2000s, and like, what was your kind
Yeah.
of general outlook on life? What did you seek inspiration from? And
Yeah, I mean, I like Cincinnati a lot. It's a, kind of a unique city because it's one of the smallest major Midwest cities, and probably actually one of the smallest cities that has like, professional sports teams in the entire country. And it's just not big, but we have kind of all the trappings that you would expect out, in LA, New York City, Chicago, whatever. We've got all that, and we just don't have like the human beings, which is a little odd, but it means everything is very, very spread out, and it takes a long time to get anywhere simply because you're just driving like 40 miles to get to a different neighborhood because it's so spread out,
right.
which is a little frustrating, with my friends and stuff. It'd be like, hey, we all want to hang out at, whoever's house. It's like, well, he lives in Milford. That's 40 minutes away, and it's an insane
Right.
city. And it's not because of traffic or anything, because no one lives there. It's because it's just 40 minutes away.
Right.
But I mean, I love Cincinnati. I still go back all the time. Big Reds fan. I like watching the Bengals and everything. But my family and whatnot is from Northern Ohio and Pennsylvania, and then the generation past that's all from Germany. So I'm only second generation American as it is, but really like it. I love the Midwest. I went to school in Michigan, live in Kentucky now. I like it a lot. Decent weather, still get some snow, get to play in that, and good scenes, especially for the Comic-Con scenes. I mean, that's where, a lot of authors like me, we make a lot of money at Comic-Cons. That's kind of our bread and butter. And
Heck
Cincinnati Comic-Con, Cincy Comic Expo, those are 2 of the biggest ones. Lexington Toy and Comic Expo is huge down here, like 80,000 people. We get a lot of good events, and honestly, a lot of authors around here too, and a lot of people you get to meet, and a lot of creative types from the Midwest. So if you don't have all those trappings of the big city, you got to come up with something to do, and that's for a lot of people creative stuff.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. It's really easy to turn to more negative things, but it's awesome for those people that do kind of take that boredom, so to speak, where there's not really a lot to do, and can turn it into some really amazing and wonderful things. And I know where I grew up near Kenosha, Wisconsin, and it's right by where all the bars were. And, basically that part of Wisconsin's idea was, oh, there's nothing else to do, so we might as well go to the bar. But on top of this, so I know you got the degrees in politics, German, and law, and you have a medical malpractice defense career. So is that like completely the only thing you are licensed in, or are you licensed in other forms of what am I trying to think in? let's circle back here for a second. I'm
No,
gonna
I
edit
got
that
you.
out.
Yeah.
But
No, Kentucky doesn't do separate licenses for specialties. Some states do. They do specialty licensing. I know Florida's one of them where you can actually be licensed as a healthcare attorney. Kentucky doesn't do any, so just a law license. You can do literally anything you want. So I've got, state and federal bar, but all I do day to day is about 95% medical malpractice defense, and the other 5% I do a little tiny bit here and there of intellectual property stuff, which is really just filing trademarks and defending trademarks for the feds. But
sure.
I love medical defense. It's unique. It's different. Every case is extremely complicated. And the best part about it is you get to learn. And I really like that. I like to read, as most authors hopefully do.
Right.
But I love to read. And a case comes in, and like today, I was working on a case of an above the knee amputation, and I need to read all about that because I need to be the expert in the room on that medicine. And I need to be able to talk to doctors who have been performing that surgery for 30 years. And they are, the bona fide expert. They know everything. They could cut your leg off today. And I need to be able to talk to them on their level. And that's the most fascinating part of it to me is I get to, my bookshelf in my office has, a handful of law books and then 15 or 20 medical textbooks. And I get to just kind of learn all about that. And I think I've done enough kidney cases where I could probably take your kidney out and there's at least a chance you'd live. Not a good one, but at least a chance.
Right. Well, I mean, I could only imagine in that career field as well that you could even, find some motivation or amuse in certain cases to put in a book, or even just having that general knowledge that the doctors do. You could write a story about someone that does that stuff and be able to put all that terminology in there to where people are going to be able to know that you know what you're talking about, and that you're not just, oh, well, I needed a doctor, so here's the doctor.
Yep. Yeah, I try to be pretty authentic, and especially like when I actually first started writing, I thought I was going to write thrillers because I really like to read thrillers. I actually didn't read a huge amount of fantasy back then, and I didn't read any lit RPGs I didn't know existed. And things like that, like I actually, it'd be, hey, I want to write about this gun. Who do I know who owns it? I need to go shoot it. And I need to feel this. I need to know what it's like. Well, how much recoil does that have? Because you can look these things up, but somebody online says, "Oh, this doesn't have any recoil," and you go shoot it, and you be like, "Well, what the hell, man? Like this blew my arm off." I mean, you need to be able to see these things and feel them. And actually, when I got into fantasy, it was an old high school friend of mine contacted me. I can't remember how she even got my info, but contacted me and was like, hey, if you're writing about like, medieval fantasy and combat and stuff like that. And she was involved in a reenactment group that did it. And I was like, well, hell yeah, like I'll come out and I just want to watch. And I watched people in real, period correct arms and armor fight each other, which is terrifying. And,
Oh, yeah.
you get to learn how to write those combat scenes because, it's not even remotely close to the movies. I mean, people don't understand how heavy a sword is.
Oh,
and
yeah.
you try
No.
swinging a sword and you're wearing, they typically say, in the real world, you wear about half your body weight in armor. If you're wearing, full steel armor. And, I'm a 200-pound guy, 100 pounds of steel hanging off my shoulders. I am not moving quick.
Nope.
That's just a fact. And, you see all these movies, you see Lord of the Rings and all that stuff. And these guys are jumping around, they're rolling, and they're fighting for like, 30, 40 minutes at a time. And in real life, a knight in 1200s is fighting for 3-minute spurts.
Yep.
And it's a lot more like UFC and very, very quick and extremely violent. And it's, you just don't have these big dramatic drawn out events. And then, learning things like I did finally at some point, I got to put on some armor and just kind of mess around, do some sparring. I'm not trained to do any of that stuff. And they're, for their legal team, you've got to be very well trained and sign every waiver under the sun to swing a sword at another human being. But a lot of it that I learned, I mean, just wearing the plate armor, and had a guy that, was one of their like licensed trainers or whatever. And he would tell me what to do, where to block. And all I was trying to do is block. And I just missed one. and he was coming high, so I hung at my head, and I just, for whatever reason, I missed. I was probably just tired, and it didn't hurt, but I still got hit at full speed with a real sword in the head against a steel helmet. But the noise inside the helmet, I mean,
Oh,
it didn't hurt at all, but the noise was disorienting because it was, it's like having your head in a bell and somebody crashes the bell.
right.
It's just too much. And learning that kind of stuff is really cool. And it's stuff you never think about because they don't show it to you in movies. And where the hell else are you going to go see a medieval combat? It's just
Right.
not a thing you can go down the street and watch whenever you want. So I like trying to make it authentic if I can. I mean, some of the stuff's impossible. I've yet to meet somebody with a dragon I could find, but someday. Someday.
Yeah, well, I think that's also something that's really awesome with fantasy as a because as an umbrella, because I definitely would qualify lit RPG as fantasy. Like if you
Oh,
had
for
to
sure.
dumb it down to a single
Yep.
genre, but um, I think the willing suspension of disbelief is so much more prevalent in fantasy and lit RPG and things like that because again you're talking about magic system and in He Who Fights with Monsters, for example, you've got your essences and and Jason's got his summons and it's you got all these different things and it's like, okay, well, if I don't allow myself to disbelieve that it's not possible, there's no way I'm going to enjoy this book because I'm just going to nitpick. Well, that's not possible. That's not possible. That's not possible.
I'm bad at watching movies now that like I've shot a bunch of guns and whatnot. Whenever I watch like an action movie, I'm just like, oh my God, not even close.
Right.
The worst one, the one that kills me is, the bad guys, got the good guy on his knees or whatever, and he's gonna point a gun in his head, and the gun just for some reason makes noise. He lifts it up, and it's like, dude, there's no moving parts involved in that. Like
Right.
nothing moves until you pull a trigger, and lifts it from his hip to his holding it out at arm's length, and it makes noise. I'm like, who's editing this in, and why do they think that would happen? It's just I can wave a gun all day. It's like waving a brick. It doesn't make any noise. And that one does drive me insane. And I'm very bad to watch those kind of movies with.
Oh, dude, I'm the same way with military movies because I joined the army when I was 17. I was a combat MP, so when I see the M4 or some of these sniper rifles, and they'll have the scope at like the end of the barrel, and it's like
Oh yeah.
what prop guy authorized this? Like
Yeah.
this is insane.
Yep.
And I'm also really big. Like I'm horrible because like it doesn't bother me, but I'm the one that'll point out continuity errors and be like, oh,
Yep.
look, they had to start this scene over, or it's a completely different shooting location. So I'm really bad
Yep.
about stuff like that. But so I guess when you are kind of getting the idea for a book, like where do you like to kind of source your motivation from? Like typically speaking, like when a book idea comes, is it kind of like a light bulb thing? Like it kind of, at least the idea of it comes into your mind out of nowhere, or is it more of like a methodical, like let's kind of build at least the idea of the book from the ground up and put some thought and effort into even just the idea of the book.
I think I've honestly done both, but what's more successful for me is the first example of just kind of an idea hits me out of the blue. And I've got this kind of a bit of a spoiler, I guess. I don't think I've ever announced this before, but you heard it here first. I've got a book in the works. I'm actually probably about 60% or so of the way through it. I think I got to go look, but um, it's a really cool one in my opinion called American Magic, and the concept behind it. I was just driving down the road, which happens all the time, and you're just driving, you listen to music or whatever, and your mind's essentially blank, kind of in a like almost meditative state.
Sure.
And I had this idea because I was thinking about a lot of the like the isekai stories, the common trope or the meme that people make fun of is, oh, I walked into the street, got hit by a bus, and now I'm in a fantasy world kind of thing, which I
Right.
love, by the way.
Same.
Honestly, a fantastic way to start a book. And I was thinking, I was like, okay, what if you got, you're all the items you're holding get isekai'd with you into the fantasy realm? And so I made my main character a military combat veteran at the gun range, blowing off steam, and she gets teleported into a fantasy world with a God, what's the name of the? It's a wild looking like stupid bullshit gun. Oh God,
the M240 Bravo or the
yeah,
Saw?
it's called like a Spectre or something like that, or um, they make them
Okay.
in like all white. They're ridiculous. I really want one because they look like sci-fi guns. But
Okay.
everybody says they're just like overpriced 9 mil carbines, which I totally
And
understand, and I don't care. I want one.
right.
But they're really cool looking and they're goofy. And so she gets teleported to the fantasy world with her, 9 mil carbine and like 230 rounds of ammo. And it's like, all right, everybody is like casting fireballs and shit at her. And she's like, all right, well, you're dead, and just shoots them. And then eventually becomes a mage and whatnot, and like starts to get powers and be able to cast some spells as well. But she's got the ultimate ace card of a functional firearm and a
Right.
fair amount of ammo for it, which is just it's a funny premise. It's goofy, it's bizarre, and I think that's a lot of fun. And a lot of it always reminds me of that, like probably the most famous scene in Indiana Jones when the big bad guy's twirling all his swords and showing off and everything, and Indiana is just like, you have a gun,
Bang.
like you just don't give a shit. And you get that moment all the time. And like one of her first quests that she gets sent on is there's this like mythical beast in the forest, and the town wants her to go kill the beast and everything. And they're like trying to set her up because like everybody, goes out and tries to kill the beast. Nobody survives. And she's like, well, does it bleed? And they're like, well, yeah, but you never get close enough to hit it. And she's like, oh, that's not a problem for me. Like, I'll just shoot it like twice. And she just goes into the woods, finds the beast, and is like, 300 yards away, and is like, yeah, this is fine. And kills it and brings the head back and is like, here you go. This is easy. They're like, what the hell? Like, you're our god now. And that stuff's a lot of fun. You get a lot of cool, just fun scenarios like that you get to play out just from the idea of, if you get isekai'd into the fantasy world with all the things you're holding, what kind of cool shit do you have?
That's so awesome that you say that. Because you and I started speaking because of the lit RPG, or I think it was lit RPG and not lit RPG books. I am a member of both pages,
Yeah, so
but
am I. Yep.
I think we started talking on lit RPG, and probably 5 or 6 days before I had made my original post. So probably about a month ago now, there had been a guy that had been like, hey, like, so what? Why is it that this whole like functional thing of like, okay, well, we've got this new system in the world, but it's not like we don't still have our like military strength and our weapons and everything. And my point to him was just like, wow, that would make a really interesting story, and I bet it would be hilarious to have that story where a gun literally solves all of the main character's problems essentially, or at least their conflicts. I was like, that would make for a really interesting book, but at the same time, if it's not right, it's just I have a gun, so I solve all the problems. And it's one of those things where I
Yeah.
feel like you have to have a nice balance to it, to where you keep the reader engaged in the story, and then you get that fight, and it's, hey, you knew what was coming. I mean, and
A lot of it is the balance of like, she knows she can't make more ammunition, and manufacturing more rounds is going to be impossible with medieval technology, and she just doesn't know how anyways, because few people do.
right.
And so a lot of it is like, okay, is this a conflict I can solve, diplomatically? Is this a conflict I can solve with, my budding skills as essentially a mage? Is this a conflict we can solve with, her friends that she makes in the fantasy world that are all your typical fantasy, cast of characters? Or is it something where I just need to, lose some 9 mil into somebody? And that's pretty much it. And it's been a lot of fun to write, and I really need to just get off my ass and just finish that one and hammer it out, because it's been just a goofy, funny ride, and a lot of the stuff I write is like super grimdark. So having some funny ones in there and some more just fun adventure, feel good type stuff is probably good for my mental health.
Oh, definitely. So, and actually, sorry, words are hard sometimes. But following that up, the one thing I had noticed, and I personally haven't really like, I get what speculative is, and I get like fiction. So like, I'm smart enough to kind of put the two pieces together. But like, what is it about speculative fiction that you enjoy so much?
Yeah, I mean, you'll find different definitions of it all over the place, of course. Most people that I talk to have said speculative fiction kind of started as the what if, what if X happens kind of thing. So separating it from like historical fiction and, nonfiction, of course. And then it's kind of over time, I guess, ballooned into pretty much your standard fantasy, sci-fi, and horror genres. So things that where the base premise is just impossible, and impossible either right now or impossible always. So, you look back at your original fantasy stuff like Lord of the Rings and original sci-fi and all your Asimov and Frank Herbert and all that. Things that take place on other planets, eventually, sure, we could get there. But as of right now, as far as we're concerned in 2025, impossible.
Sure.
And hopefully the giant sandworm from Dune is impossible forever, but I don't know. So that's the kind of thing. And I really just, what got me into it all, because I read a strange, eclectic set of books. I've got a whole library in my house, and at least half of my library is poli-sci and history, because I love that stuff. But I like, the things about fantasy that I really like all stem from starting out by reading Orson Scott Card and Ender's Game. And I was 16 years old. My mom got me Ender's Game because she saw it at Barnes and Noble, and it was on a table that said like what teens are reading today or something like that. Some corny bullshit sign, but it was true.
Marketing genius level of advertisement.
And she bought the book. My mom gave it to me. It was either for my birthday or Christmas or something. I don't remember, but I got the book. And I was kind of like every 16-year-old boy. I was like, oh, great, a book. And I didn't really like to read too much. I read for school. I read all my assignments, and, I was a good little school kid, and that was it. And someday I just got so bored sitting in my bed at night, and I was like, you know what? This book's been sitting here. I'll give it a shot. And I stayed up all night for like 2 weeks because I was addicted instantly. And I remember I finished the book, and I went to my mom, and I was like, Mom, like, this is the greatest book ever written. Now at this point, I've read like 10 books, like, sure. And 3 of them are Shakespeare. And I'm like, okay, this is the greatest book ever written. Is there anything else that's like this? And she looks at it, kind of reads the back and whatnot. And she goes, well, this is just sci-fi, right? And I'm like, I don't know. I've never read it. At this point, I'd literally never read another sci-fi book. And she's like, your dad was in the Sci-Fi Society of like Cincinnati or whatever, the Sci-Fi Club. And I'm like, all right. And she's like, go downstairs on the bookshelf, pick anything you want. Like, and we had this giant bookshelf that I'd never known about. And literally it was floor to ceiling, like 14-foot ceiling, floor to ceiling bookshelf, nothing but sci-fi, because my dad was in the Cincinnati like sci-fi club, or I don't know what the name was exactly, but that's all he read. And the first book I picked was Battlefield Earth and some L. Ron Hubbard. Nice. So read some good propaganda at 16 years old. I had no idea, but right. I read, Battlefield Earth. He had a couple of the X-Files books because he was deep into X-Files. He had like every Tom Clancy. We had just all these classic staples of sci-fi and Dune and all that. And I've been a lost soul ever since. So, I mean, I had no idea sci-fi even existed. My mom wasn't a reader. She didn't read books. She still doesn't. And I just, it wasn't part of my life. And it was Ender's Game. And I loved it. I've got the entire Ender's Game series on my shelf still. They're fantastic books. I recommend them to everybody I meet. And I've read a ton of the X-Files books. I've read a ton of Tom Clancy. I actually just like 30 minutes ago, or I guess 45 minutes ago now, I downloaded Casino Royale on my Kindle. So nice. gonna actually finally read a James Bond book, which I've never read before. So it just, as soon as I kind of fell into the deep end on sci-fi and just that concept that you can make up whatever you want, like you could just make it up. Like just things can be as cool as you want them to be. Right. And that's awesome. Like I absolutely love that idea. And I love that Card made an Ender's Game, and it's great too, being a history and philosophy nerd, reading Orson Scott Card is perfect because he is too. Right. And all of his stuff is based off of like old school political philosophy. And that's what I ended up studying in college. So it just, worked out perfect. And I've never met Orson Scott Card, but if I did, I'd tell him he's basically shaped my entire life. So for better or worse, I don't know if he'd like that, but
yeah. Yeah. My mom, when I was 11, And the Harry Potter, the first couple Harry Potter books had already been out, and I was very staunchly against sitting down to read. And I have severe ADHD, so it's unless it's like a video game or something I'm hyper fixated on, it's very difficult
Yeah,
for me to
sure.
sit
Yep.
down and sit still. And so she's like, well, I read this book because she was reading it for herself, and she's like, I think you would really like it.
Hmm.
And I'm like, Mom, really? And she's like, you don't have to read it, but I think you should. I think you'd really enjoy it. And Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was the book that just lit a fire under my
Yeah.
ass, and I just started consuming books like wildfire. And like I was
Millions of people.
yeah, and
Yeah,
I was
millions.
I was very much that person that would go to the midnight release, and the book would be finished by by midnight the next day. And then I'd
I
I'd
read.
hate myself for it too.
I mean, that was the popular book when I was reading, Orson Scott Card and Dune. Everybody else is reading Harry Potter, so of course I read it too. And I read the first four. And what I stopped on from four was they set up like the tournament or whatever in four on the Quidditch field. My favorite part about Harry Potter was the Quidditch matches. So I found out that from that, I actually like 10 years later, I was looking back and I was like, man, why didn't I ever finish that series? I'm like, well, because the Quidditch is gone. I'm like, do I just really like sports books? And it turns out that I kind of do. And like that was my favorite part. And I've said now for like 10 years, I'm like, J.K. Rowling would make an excellent sports column writer.
Oh
Like
yeah,
if she was the beat writer for the Reds or something, like I would subscribe to that column in a heartbeat.
yeah.
She knows how to do it.
That Quidditch World Cup chapter was absolutely immaculate. That was a wonderful
It's just
chapter.
I don't know why, but I loved it. Like if the writing is just different or better or whatever it was, like I loved her descriptions of sports, and I could visualize it so perfectly, and it just connected to me really well. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense because obviously I've never played Quidditch, but
Right.
it worked, and I really really liked it.
Heck yeah. I've done. I mean, one of my favorite mystery authors. I don't know if you've ever heard of her. Is Nora Roberts or J.D. Robb.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah,
love
yeah.
the In-Depth series. I mean, there's just to be clear, there's a little bit of smut in it, and I'm obviously not telling you that, but anyone that might watch this video. But there's a bit of smut in it, but the actual mystery, I love those books. And I was just kind of curious that, outside of, the books that I mean, I guess include the books that you've published. I'd ask, of the books that you've published, which one was your favorite to actually like write and complete, as well as what would you say, out of like fantasy lit RPG or, speculative fiction, like which book are you choosing to introduce people into that genre?
Yeah, I mean, of my stuff, the easiest one to get into that I always recommend to people that have never read lit RPG, and I do Comic Cons all over the country all the time, and I get tons of people that come up, and I've got a big lit RPG banner that I display at the booth and everything, and people always come up and they go, "What does that mean?" And a lot of people think it means tabletop RPGs. And I love getting to explain it to them and introduce people to the genre. And I always recommend Killstreak. And that series is the highest level assassin in the world has been killed and has to respawn back at level 1. He's still got his Snake Man sidekick. He's still got his guild of assassins that he was running. He still has all his knowledge of the world. And because he was the highest level when he died, he gets to basically unlock a whole set of new classes that no one else has before. And he becomes essentially a chaos elemental mage, which I actually based off of one of my own D&D characters. And that's a lot of fun, and it's easy to get into. It's no real isekai or anything. It's just the world happens to have lit RPG elements. And as the story goes, you kind of figure out a little bit about why, but the main plot is not, him trying to get back to Earth or anything like that. That one's a lot of fun, and it's really easy for people to get into. My favorite that I've ever written is the Shadowlith series. That is traditional epic fantasy. It was my second epic fantasy series that I wrote after Goblin Wars. I think that's my best overall writing and my best stuff. I really like it a lot. When the first book came out, now it's been 9 or 10 years or something like that. We hit #1 in 4 different countries when that one dropped, which is awesome.
Nice.
My publisher was shocked, but that book is I think it's really good. It's a lot of it mirrors my own life a little bit. You know, you kind of write what you know, as everybody does. And I kind of wrote a lot of myself into that one. So there's a lot of personal connection there. I like that book a lot. Very easy to get into for non-fantasy readers as well. A lot of like my mom's friends have read that book, which is
Nice.
always odd to me. And it kind of shakes me, shakes me to my core a little bit, because people that like I know, but I don't know them. They're my mom's friends. They'll come up and they'll be like, I read your book. And they just leave it at that. And I'm like, Jesus, okay. Thank you. I don't know what's coming next, but yeah, a lot of people, a lot of non-fantasy readers have really liked that series, and a lot of the hardcore fantasy readers like it a lot, because it's that one I kind of based off of, I think it was a Brandon Sanderson quote, where I was watching an interview with him, and he was talking about how if you're starting out writing fantasy, the biggest mistake you can make is having too much magic. And I took that to heart, and I really like that idea because it makes sense. And his entire philosophy out of that interview I was watching was, if you have, magic system that is basically, kind of like Harry Potter, where there's a spell for literally everything. Well,
Right.
then your characters are never truly in a jam. Like, they never are really facing dire consequences because there's a spell for that. And if you limit the magic system dramatically, then you can write a lot more realistic characters, because the decisions they have to make are going to be insanely realistic, because they don't have a button they can push to get out of anything. So the magic system in the Shadowless series is all based off of shadows. And essentially, there's only one type of magic, and it is controlling your own shadow. Well, your shadow can't do anything because it doesn't have mass. It can move around and it can walk and it can basically terrify people, because that's terrifying.
Right.
But that's about it. It can't really do anything else. And so it's an extremely limited magic system. And I really like that concept. And I think that's what a lot of new fantasy readers really like. Outside of that, what I always recommend to people, one of my favorite speculative fiction series in the world is by an author that I actually know pretty well now, also from Cincinnati, called Mike Leon. And Mike Leon has a series called Kill, Kill, Kill. And if you are squeamish and you have a light stomach, do not read it. If you like blood and guts and gore, it will be the best thing you've ever read in your life. He has also some of the most insane covers I've ever seen in my life. And his stuff, I cannot get enough. It is insane level satire, and that's his main genre. He always describes to people as it is satire, and I love that. It's basically Voltaire writing, but the main character is a ridiculous, like overpowered, basically Rambo. But and honestly, his plot is actually somewhat similar to Rambo. He's done all these horrible things overseas for all these shady, backwater, black cell operative, dark site government work. And then he comes back home, and he just wants to retire. But the people that he has wronged, which is basically the entire world, does not want him to retire. They want him to die. And you have essentially the world's highest trained, best skilled killing machine, and he works at GameStop because he just wants to live a quiet life in the Midwest. And the world's darkest, special ops agencies are sending the best they have to kill him at GameStop. And that is phenomenal. And I absolutely love it. And his writing is beyond insane. It's very like splatterpunk. Like, the gore is next level off the chart. If you've not seen at least Evil Dead, you're in for a hell of a shock, because the gore is way beyond Evil Dead even. And Mike Leon, I mean, he's one of my good friends, and he's real messed up. And I think he'd be the first one to tell you that.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, I love it. If you want to read, that's like quintessential pulpy spec fic, because it's got all the pulpy, gory, graphic elements that you kind of want from a visceral standpoint. But underneath it all, it's a really intelligent literary satire of modern society, and I love that shit. Like, it's the best of all worlds. Fantastic.
Yeah. Okay, and then so with writing books and then as well as being like a musician, have you ever kind of found that writing one versus the other kind of inspires you for something with the other, or have you ever
So
tried
music,
to
yeah, yeah,
incorporate
music
that?
always inspires the writing. I have to listen to the right genre and the right type of music for the book I'm writing. I have to. Like it's a weird thing in my brain. Like I just can't get in the right space to describe a scene if the sounds aren't right, which
Sure.
is probably, I don't know, some kind of mental illness, but okay. Uh, I'm a metalhead. I truly, and I know everybody says this, listen to everything.
Yep.
Um, I grew up listening to country and bluegrass. And when I got to college, I got deep into opera of all things.
Oh yeah.
And I played in a bluegrass band at the same time. So I listened to a ton of opera and played bluegrass, guitar and banjo, and a little bit of violin. And a lot of people are always blown away when I say this. If you combine those things, you combine, what is bluegrass known for? Speed, technicality, musicality, everything. You pick any bluegrass song you want in the world. It's faster than hell, and the guitar player and the banjo player are phenomenal. They're proteges of their instruments and just the best of the best. So high levels of speed, high levels of technicality. And then the thing that people like about opera is it's over the top. Everything is just way bigger than it needs to be. It's super bombastic. It's really, blown way out of proportion. I mean, you have a character's death scene in an opera taking 15 minutes that has been, stabbed through the gut and they're singing during the whole thing. And it's just way over the top and insane. Well, if you combine those two things, you have kind of, prodigy level instrument playing, tons of speed, way over the top. Your answer there is always metal. That's the only genre that combines them all.
Yep.
And so, like, I've been a hardcore metalhead basically for the past like 15 years, and I love that because it's everything I like about music. And it's just perfect. And I've got to have typically, I've got to have the right music going when I'm writing, and that's probably why a lot of my stuff comes out really dark too. But I try to work in a lot of metal lyrics into a lot of my books, and I'll have a lot of little like very very small Easter eggs. And like in the Forsaken Talents series, the main town that the main character starts in is named Whitechapel, and
Nice.
just I love Whitechapel. It's a good band.
Heck yeah.
It's fantastic. There are Dimmu Borgir lyrics in like 8 of the books I've written. There's just tons of them, but a lot of their lyrics are like really philosophical and really deep. And there's just always moments where like characters can slide one of those in, and like no one's ever gonna know this but me, and I love it. Um, I've got in the Goblin Wars series that I wrote, there are characters. There's actually one character, I don't think I name him, but there's a character who's a guard captain, and he's only in a handful of scenes, and he literally only speaks in lyrics from the band O Sleeper, which is one of my all-time favorite bands. And every line he has is just an O Sleeper lyric. And it's just cool stuff like that I'll try to like wheedle into a lot of the stuff that I write. And it's always, the music just inspires pretty much everything I write, and it sets the tone and the atmosphere. And I'm always jealous because, like, Neff House, we publish a lot of romance and erotica as well. And it's a big thing in romance and erotica to put a playlist at the start of your book. And fantasy and lit RPG doesn't do that yet.
Nope.
I may be the first one to do it.
Right.
I really like doing that, and I will introduce people to bands they have never heard of that have like 30 viewers on Spotify or whatever, and they will be terrified.
That's awesome though, man, because art definitely inspires art. I know that. So I just wasn't
Oh,
sure
yeah.
if
It has to.
yeah, no, most definitely. Um is there anything else? I know we're getting kind of close to here about that hour mark. So I'd like to ask if there's anything in particular that you're, eager to, just let people that might watch this know, just the self promotion, shameless plug, as the younger generation would say.
Oh, yeah.
um,
Yeah, the last thing that I had come out, I got a short story collection that just came out called Blades and Bullets. That one's a lot of fun. It's me and 3 other authors, and it's a little bit different than your standard short story collection. So we each did 30,000 words, however you wanted to break those 30,000 up. So mine is I did a about a 25,000 word dark fantasy like kind of novella and a 5,000 word short story thriller. And set in modern times, set on Earth and everything, so way different than my normal stuff. And then we've got Sina Andeo's in there, and she writes dark fantasy stuff and gave us a really cool novella. We've got Mike Leon is actually in that one as well, and crazy nonsense splatterpunk that I love. And then we got a new guy, Bill Pierce, that this is the first writing from him I've ever read, and he writes traditional sword and sorcery, so like Conan the Barbarian stuff. Very cool. I love Conan. I've always been a big fan of Arnold, and love the Conan series. So it's a really cool short story collection adjacent novella collection, and you really get a smattering of everything you could ever want from 4 very different authors. And we're all kind of bringing unique stuff that maybe didn't fit into anything else that we had going on, and that one's a lot of fun. Definitely check that out, Blades and Bullets. And then I am actively working on book 3 for Forsaken Talents, and need to get that out. I actually had a guy today, just today, was asking me when that book's coming out, but I have a lot of people sending me that same email all the time.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I've had it outlined. I mean, for 5 years, like I said, a lot of life changes, so many life changes. I literally had just written like the first 3 chapters of it back in it would have been spring of 2023, and my wife was lifting weights at the gym and blew a brain vessel in her, or a blood vessel in her brain. And she lived, so surprisingly.
Yeah.
But thank God, yeah. But that, derailed my whole life for a solid year, if not more.
Right.
We just, I had to quit my job and, left the firm I was working for, and we were in the hospital for 2 full weeks in the ICU and round the clock care, and then basically round the clock care at home for probably 6 to 8 weeks after that. And then it was, kind of getting back into the swing of things just a little bit here and there, and, going to work part-time for a little bit, and then, trying to move to full-time. So, and then trying to work from home a little bit, help take care of her and make sure, just nothing's going to happen. And,
Sure.
And just, the whole, everything I had kind of got derailed by one thing after another between, moving industries, moving cities, COVID, and then, all the medical issues. But I'm finally at a firm that I intend to stay at, for the rest of my career, hopefully, that I really like. I'm in a house that I intend to stay in for at least the next 20 years that I really like. I'm in a city that I really like. So hopefully things have kind of calmed down enough to the point where I can get to that correct headspace. And like I said at the beginning of all this, when I'm cooking, when I'm writing, I can churn out a lot of content because I just won't sleep. And that, if I hit one of those spurts, it's 35 to 50,000 words a week, and I'll do it till it's done. And the fastest I've written was that first Kill Streak book was 17 days. And that's right around 100,000 words. Cooked that out in 17 days. And those are like 18-hour days. And I just sat at the computer and just wrote. And that's how I operate. I go in bursts. I know a lot of authors, they'll say, oh, just write 200 words a day. 200 words a day is a book a year. And I'm like, that's cool. Not me. I can't do it. I don't know how to do that. It can't be done. Not in my mind. And 200 words for me is like one juicy paragraph. That's it. Like if I sit down to write, I'm doing 5,000 words a session, like kind of bare minimum. And I know for some people that's a lot. For other people, that's nothing. I know Chris Fox is one of my author friends, and talking to him, I don't think there's anybody on this planet that writes more content than Chris Fox. And when he sits down, I mean, his whole shtick, and he actually sells a program on his website on kind of training you how to do it, is 5,000 words an hour. And for a lot of people, I mean, 5,000 words is a week or 2 weeks. His goal is 5,000 an hour, and he hits it. That's brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, he's people talk to me and they're like, dude, you write so fast. I'm like, you have no idea. You have no idea. But even, you look back and I think it was George Orwell, and he actually wrote his philosophy was 20,000 words a day. And you look at some of his books and you're like, okay, Animal Farm's like 82,000 words. And he's just like, yeah, 4.5 days. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, sure, man.
That is
Good job.
yeah.
So there's a lot of people out there that are a lot better than me when it comes to content.
Hello.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Sorry, you cut. I think you cut out just for the end of content there. So I thought I didn't know if I had lost you or not. But
Yep, I'm still here.
hey, awesome. Well, I guess at this point, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me and all that. And I'm sure your wife's ready for you to be done talking to the stranger on the internet. But I guess
she's a writer too. She knows.
nice. I guess just one last question for you to end things off would be like a message you would have for someone that is, say, an aspiring writer that is having, dealing with that mental block of actually putting the pen to paper and actually getting started.
Yeah, it's hard. I think most people would say it's hard. Don't let anybody tell you it's easy, because it's not. It's just a hard profession, hard hobby, hard life. But the biggest thing, and I think it's actually a Stephen King quote, somebody can probably correct me if it's not, but it's that you can't edit a blank page. And I tell that to a lot of people. Like I said, I do Comic-Cons all over. We get a lot of people that come up and they just want to pitch their book idea. The first thing I always ask them, say, stop pitching me your idea. Have you written it yet? And 9 times out of 10, they say, well, no. And it's like, okay, then your idea doesn't matter, because by the time you get it done, somebody else will have thought of it as well, or somebody gets something close and they'll actually do it. And it's really just that mentality of, if you want to do it, and that's it. And so many people, they tell me, oh, I don't have time. And I get that, I'm a busy guy too. And hell, I'm a corporate attorney. I play in like 2 different bands. I run a YouTube channel. I own a publishing company. I own a bar and a restaurant in town. I've got all sorts of shit going on. If I can make time, anybody can make time. And a lot of people, it's kind of that daunting, well, I don't know where to start. And I always say, well, just think of the coolest scene from your book and start there. And that's typically what I do. And, if I've got an idea in my head and I kind of, I know some scenes or whatever, I just go, okay, that sounds like, let me just write it. And as long as you get started, it doesn't matter if you start at the beginning, because hell, you're not writing on pen and paper. You're writing on, Microsoft Word or something. You can just move it. And a lot of people, I think, they get really scared about that. And it's like, well, I don't know how to start the beginning. And it's like, dude, half my books don't have a beginning. They just start in an action scene, because that's where I started writing it. That's literally it. Like, you go in and fill in the blanks later. Like, and if you actually think, especially in fantasy, think about how many books actually start at the very, 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 very beginning. Right. There are a handful. And, yeah, sure, Lord of the Rings, we start at the Shire. Okay. The what is it, the Shannara series, I can't remember who did the Shannara series, but the Shannara series starts with like the old druid or whatever, and he's like telling you the history of what happened and all that. Okay, that's like it. Everything else starts in action. Like, it always starts, and you're not assumed to know everything, but you drip feed the reader. You drip feed them the world building and the history. And you think of Game of Thrones and how that starts. And it starts with Bran is climbing a tower and gets knocked off by Jaime. You don't know who these people are or their importance. I don't even think you know if Jaime and Cersei are brother and sister yet. All you know is a kid is climbing a tower and gets his ass beat and gets knocked down, and they tried to kill him, but it just paralyzes him. And that's how it starts. And that's a good action scene. It's compelling. It's addicting. It's well written. And it sold a bazillion copies. So, for anybody just trying to get into writing, just think of a cool scene that's going to be in your book and just write it. And that's it. And you'll instantly start writing more. And another good piece of advice that I've heard from Tony Acree, who writes a really cool thriller series called The Hand of God. And his writing advice, I've seen him at conventions give this advice on like writing panels and whatnot. And he said, always stop your writing session in the middle of a chapter. And people, when he said that, were like, what? what do you mean? Like, this is blasphemy. I mean, all these other authors on the panel and people literally looking at him like, who's this lunatic? And his whole theory was like, think about it from a reader's perspective. If you're reading a really good book that you really like and you stopped in the middle of a chapter, how soon will it be before you come back? An hour? 2 hours? It certainly won't be the next day. You're going to finish that chapter that day. If you do the same thing with writing, it'll happen the same way. And that is mind blowing. Like, it's so basic, it's so simple, but it's so true. And you never think about it. If you stop writing in the middle of a scene, you're going to come back in an hour because you want to finish that scene. And now instead of writing, one session for maybe 1,500 words, you've written 2 sessions for 3,000 words. And you can really churn out a lot more content that way. And really the last one was from an author, AJ Scudieri, who's also another thriller author that I've seen at a couple conventions. I think she's in Tennessee or something. I don't know. But her advice that has stuck with me, which is really funny, said, if you want to write a book, throw your phone in the ocean. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I get it. I understand the sentiment. And it's literally just, you've just got to actually do it. And you've just got to stop the distractions. And that's a huge thing for any goal you set, in any aspect of your life at all. Do you, if you want to do it, if your phone's sitting right there, well, guess what? You're going to look at your phone because we're all addicted to the stupid phone.
Mm-hmm.
If you just leave it in a different room and you tell yourself you're not going to go get your phone until you've got, 2,000 words written or something, that's it. That'll work. And I think that helps a lot of people. And it's super basic advice, but by God, is she right?
Right.
It's absolutely true. And there are companies now that sell laptops that specifically don't have internet cards. They cannot connect to the internet. And there are companies out there that sell, I get ads for them all the time, being a writer, that sell basically modern versions of typewriters. And it's just a tiny little keyboard with a tiny little screen, and all it can do is type and word process. It can't do anything else. So if you're sitting at that, you're not going to be distracted by, the sports game or whatever else, or the news, or just anything. You're going to sit down and actually do your work. And that, I think, is very key advice. If you're going to write, don't be scared of starting. Start where the hell you want and figure it out later. Like Stephen King said, you can't edit a blank page. And if you're going to write, actually sit down and do it. And even if it's only, for 15 minutes at a time, if you're a 200 word a day kind of person, that is still a novel in a year. That's true. I mean, that's 1,000 words a week, or technically 1,400 words a week, but that'll get you around 75,000 in a year. Pretty good. And a lot of times, 200, like I said, for me, that's like, 1 or 2 juicy paragraphs. A lot of times sitting down and saying, well, I've only got 15 minutes, I'll write 200 words. Next thing you know, it's 15 minutes and you've written 1,000. It's just, it'll happen if you sit down and do it. And that's advice I need to tell myself. But as soon as, like I said, after this, I'm finishing up an editing project I've got going on. And then I got to sit down, and it's Forsaken Towns 3. That's on my list.
Heck yeah, man. Well, Stuart, thank you so much for sitting down with me again today, man. It's been a pleasure to talk with you and get to know you better, man. Excuse me. Which is, exactly kind of what I hope to do with this channel, is to get to have conversations like this and just, again, bring more awareness to this genre. And not even that, because, now we've talked about speculative fiction, and I'm sure a lot of the other authors I'll hopefully be speaking with probably don't only stick to one particular genre and write only in that. So,
Oh yeah.
thank you so very much for being the first and giving me a chance to get this platform started. And yeah, appreciate you, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and it's a good time.
All right, thanks, man. Well, you take care of yourself and have a wonderful evening. I look forward to that 9mm carbine book. All right.
Oh yeah, that'll be a fun one.
All right, take care of yourself.
Yep. See ya.
Bye.